Hey there, Peepsy Doodles. This is the first time I've done like an actual video that I haven't done live in forever, and it's just so weird because I'm so used to talking to you guys. So today I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I had somebody on my last video recommend quite a few really cool topics that they wanted me to cover, and one of them was library chats. And if any of you know me, I am like a freaking nut when it comes to books. I've gotten into reading like super hardcore, more so than what I even was in the past in the last year or so. I've really been picking up stuff and flying through things, and so I'm gonna do library chats here and there with different subjects and different things. And so to start this one off, quite a few people requested that I do my favorites. So this is going to be kind of like my favorites part one, because this is going to be my favorite books that I've read in the past year. Year and a half ish, like the past my recent favorites. There you go. So yeah, I'm gonna, and some of these are standalone books, some of these, a lot of them actually, are part of a series, and so I'll kind of go through them and explain a little bit about what they are, and we'll kind of go from there. So my first book is called, now I pronounce it A Man Called Ove. I know that the name is foreign, and I think it's actually Ove. There's a movie and they pronounce it Ove, but I call it A Man Called Ove, and it's by Frederick Bachman. This book, this is a type of genre that I don't read a lot. I do a lot of young adult, Jesus. I do a lot of young adult fantasy type readings, and that's what a lot of the rest of the stuff is. But this one, I'm part of a reading book on Facebook, or a reading group on Facebook called The Reading Nook, and people had recommended this book over and over and over, and so I ended up getting it for Christmas. And basically, if you guys have ever seen the movie Up, the Disney Pixar movie Up, Ove is pretty much that guy. He's an older gentleman. He's grumpy as all hell. He's not nice to anybody. He lost his wife very early on, and that was like the one thing that he held near and dear to him. And so after she died, he just didn't really see any point of living. So the rest of the book basically goes back and forth between his present day and him dealing with his new neighbors and their small foreign wife and his interactions with her, and him trying not to like her, but he really does, not like in a loving way, but like in a father-daughter sort of way. And then to his past, and you get to go through him and his wife meeting and their relationship and how she passed and that whole thing. And I just have to tell you guys that even though Ove is a grump ass, you will absolutely fall in love with him. Like, he is just such a fun character to read about. All of the surrounding characters are super fun to watch him interact with them, and to see the things that he does, and even though he does them in such a gruff way, how it's really his way of showing that he cares. And I cried to the point to where I couldn't see to keep reading at least twice during this book, and I have not been moved to that kind of emotion for a really long time. I laughed, I cried. I mean, I finished it within a few days. It's absolutely amazing. So if you're looking for something lighthearted but also really emotional, I highly recommend A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. So the next series that I read and absolutely fell in love with was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I have one of her other series called A Throne of Glass, and I knew that was the first series that she read, and I have not read that yet. So this is the first series that I read by that author. Basically, Court of Thorns and Roses, it has 3 main books and a novella. There's A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin, I want to say. And then there's A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is like the novella that goes afterwards. The first book I really, really liked. I felt like I really got into it the second half of it. The second book was like unputdownable, which I know that's not a word, but it's a word now. And the third book was, once again, it was really good. It was really political, so it wasn't as fantastic as the second book, but I feel like the second book is what makes the series as amazing as it is. So the story is about a girl named, her name is Farah. It's Feyre, but I always called her Fair throughout the whole book because after, I don't get it. I don't like the name. Like the name Farah didn't fit for her. So I don't know if you guys have read books and character names come out a certain way and then you realize that you're pronouncing them wrong and you can't go to the correct pronunciation. Well, that was kind of the way that I did it. So there's a girl named Farah, and she is a human girl. She lives in a small village with her two sisters and her dad. Her mom had passed away, and so she is like the hunter-gatherer of the family. She takes care of everybody. Her dad just kind of sits and sulks, and her sisters are bitches. And she ends up going out into the woods one day and killing a large animal. And then when she gets home, I'm not going to spoil things, but another large animal of that same sort comes and takes her away, and it's basically a fairy. Now, when we think of fairies, we think of like small and petite and wings. No, these fairies are like deadly warriors, so they are badass. And so the whole series is basically about her surviving in the fairy world. You know, fairies and humans, the humans have always known that fairies existed, but they live on the other side of the wall from fairies, and they're not supposed to interact with humans, and in this case they do. And so she ends up finding her place in the fairy universe, and it's amazing to watch her trials and how she goes about it, and just like where she ends up. And I can't give you a ton of information because there's such a huge twist in it. The romance in it is utterly amazing. That's kind of like a huge thing that stands out in the book, is the romance aspect of it, and the fairies that Farah falls in love with, and her relationship issues between those people. The characters are super lovable, even though some of them are extremely gruff. You can't help but love them. And so if you like the kind of characters where you have like magic and fairies and that type of thing, I highly recommend A Court of Thorns and Roses, because it was awesome. There are battles, there's like bloody goodness, there's also lots of love. I mean, it's great. It's like right up my alley. I'll leave that one for a minute. So the next series, I'll do this one, that I got into. So this is the second book. The first book is called Caravelle. The second book is called Legendary. I don't have the first book with me right now because I borrowed it to my sister-in-law because I told her she had to read it. And these are by Stephanie Garber. I have never read a series of books. Now, there's only two. But I've never read books that are quite like Caravelle, which is why I think I loved them as much as I did. Caravelle is about two sisters that every year the Caravelle, which is this carnival type thing, it's a series of 5 nights. It's a game that is very mystified. It's magical, and people don't know a lot about it, but it comes to this island that they live at, and they have wanted to go to it forever. And if you win this game, you get a wish. Any wish granted that you want. So the first book follows the first sister. The second book follows her little sister. And they're both great. Like, when I read the first book, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. There's a romance aspect to it that's awesome, but it's also just playing through the game, and I don't want to spoil a whole lot, but you know, trying to figure out what's part of the game, and who is actually part of the game, and who are actors in the game, and who is being true and being realistic, and who's actually trying to help her. And then Scarlet. Sorry, I was like totally blanking on the name of the first sister. Scarlet is who the first book is about. And then Donatella is who the second book is about. I totally spaced. And so when I got done reading Caravelle, I was like, oh my gosh, like I am just so in love with Scarlet. And, you know, she's a bit more timid. She's a bit more fearful, whereas Donatella is the younger, more outgoing, more brass sister. So the second book is about her, and I was really nervous about it because I loved how the first book went so much that I knew, and especially Scarlet's love interest, I absolutely adored them. And so I was really nervous knowing that with the second book, it wasn't going to follow Scarlet as much as it was more about Tella and her journey. And I adored the second book just as much, if not more, than the first one. And so I highly recommend, if you guys, you know, love, it's just, I don't even know how to describe it other than it's just magical. It's unlike any kind of book series that I've read before. It was completely unique and new, and I loved it. You know, it was full of magic and mystery, and there was romance. You know, for me, on my young adult stuff, I love having a good romance. I just love it. So I highly recommend Caravelle and Legendary by Stephanie Garber. So this series, this is the first in the series, Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie, Maniscalco, I think is how you say her name. There are multiple books in this series. There is Stalking Jack the Ripper. The second one is Hunting Dracula. And the third one that I just read is Escaping Houdini. And so these are another set of books that just kill me. I fell in love with Stalking Jack the Ripper when I first read it year and a half ago. This one is about a young girl named Audrey Rose. Well, she's not young. I think she's 16 or 17. She's in her late teens. And it's back in like the 1800s. She's in London area, and she is, you know, she's supposed to be prim and proper and love tea parties, and she does not. Instead, she sneaks off to her uncle, who does autopsies, which is very frowned upon, and it's kind of looked more as like a mad scientist practice back in that era. And it's definitely not for young ladies. Well, that is what she wants, is she wants to be, you know, she loves being with the dead. She loves doing autopsies. She loves carving into people and figuring out their cause of death. Like, it's just it's her passion. So she has been doing this in secret, and all of a sudden along comes Jack the Ripper. And so she is working alongside her uncle and alongside her uncle's other young ward. And they are, his name is Thomas Cresswell. And to read Audrey Rose and Thomas and their bantering back and forth, and just how much they adore each other but they don't want to adore each other, and to watch their story unfold through the 3 books is so much fun. But it's also, you know, it's all of them seem to have like a supernatural element to them, which ends up at the end not being as supernatural as what you once thought it was. And so it's full of like that kind of like, is it supernatural? Is it human? The twists that are in all of the books are phenomenal. They're bloody, they're gory, they're just so much fun to read. I know that sounds gross. I'm a surgical tech. I work in surgery. I love the blood and guts. But it's done in it's done in a decent way, so don't feel like it's, but I mean, you know about Jack the Ripper. She doesn't shy away from telling you a lot of what the crime scenes looked like. So this has been like one of my all-time favorite series that I have read. It's in my top 5 for sure. So there was Stalking Jack the Ripper. The next one was Killing Dracula, which was also amazing because that one adds even more of the supernatural aspect to it. and then the last one was Escaping Houdini, which I was really worried about because it's like, how do you go from Jack the Ripper and Dracula to Houdini? But she did a fantastic job with that too. And then the last one is not out yet, and it has a title, but I can't remember. I know it's something with the devil, and I can't remember the exact name of it. But I highly, highly, highly recommend this set of books, Stalking Jack the Ripper. They are amazing. And the last book that I'm going to get into for now, and then I will come back to my favorites at a different time, is the series that I am currently reading, The City of Bones. So, City of Bones, also known as the Mortal Instruments series, is by Cassandra Clare, and I just have to tell you guys that I have not fallen in love with a series quite as hard as I have with this one, probably since I read Twilight when I was in high school. And I know that sounds ridiculous. It's like, oh, Twilight. No, like Twilight, I lived and breathed the Twilight books. I lived vicariously through them. I cried. I just, they were my everything. And I haven't found anything quite as, that drew me in quite as much as the City of Bones series. So there are, there's a lot. There are 6 books in the Mortal, like this Shadowhunter series. And then she has a prequel series called The Infernal Devices. And then there is a series that follows this series with a separate set of characters called The Dark Artifacts. So with these, there is the City of Bones, the City of Ashes, the City of Glass, which are the 3 that I have read. I just started the City of Fallen Angels, which is number 4. And then the City of Lost Souls and the City of Heavenly Fire are the 5th and 6th books. So I can't tell you as much in the 4th, 5th, and 6th book because I haven't got there yet, but I know that I'm not going to be disappointed. There's a huge following around the Shadowhunters. There is a TV series. There's a movie that didn't do too well. Excuse me. But basically this book, or these books, the original 6, follow Clarissa Frey. She is a 16-year-old girl who thinks that she's super normal with her best friend Simon, and she ends up going into a club one night that she is drawn to, and she witnesses something take place with people that nobody else can see but her. And so that draws her into the Shadowhunter realm. Shadowhunters are basically demon hunters. And so she meets up with this group of people, Isabel and Alec and Jace, who are Shadowhunters right in her town. And so much ends up happening between them that I don't want to give any of it away. But first of all, you have, of course, there's a romance aspect to it. There's a couple different romances that end up blossoming. There's the main one between Clary and her person that I'm not going to spoil. And the amount of shit that goes on between them in the first 3 books that they have to try to get over is ungodly. It is insane. And so to watch them try to fight through that is just amazing. And it just rips your heart out, but also keeps you fighting for them at the same time. But then, you also have these little side stories that start to bloom and take effect as the series rolls on. But it's not just that, sometimes you keep going with a book because of the romance. But the story, like, right here there's a quote from Stephanie Meyer that says, "The Mortal Instruments series is a story world that I love to live in." And that sums it up. The world that Cassandra Clare creates is just fucking amazing. It is magical. There's fairies, there's vampires, there's demons, there's werewolves, but the way that they're all described and like there are so many different types of demons, and she goes through great lengths to make sure that you know exactly what each one looks like, smells like, sounds like, all of the different families of downworlders, the werewolves, the vampires, all of these different classes of creatures. You know, they have their own way about them. They have their own society, and she makes sure that you are well aware of all of that, and you have a really good understanding of it. And so not only are you there because, you know, you have this romance aspect, but you're there because of the world that she creates, and you care about what's happening. You care about the characters and what they're going through, and the relationships, not only the love relationships, but the relationships that Clary forms with the rest of the Shadowhunter community and with the other Downworlder communities. It's an amazing ride. I've read the first 3 books within the last week and a half. I've been flying through them. I started the 4th book today. I stayed up until 3 a.m. the other night, knowing that I had to get up with my daughter in the morning just to finish the 3rd book. And I can't tell you anything other than they're amazing. And if you pick any of these series to read, go with City of Bones. If you're going to just pick one, this series is probably, I mean, it's one of my favorite series of all time, and I haven't even finished it yet, and I am so excited. I was so excited when I started reading the first one that I went on to thriftbooks.com, which is a used books site that I just recently found, and I purchased the rest of the series. So I have all 12 books, plus there's a Shadowhunters Codex that you'll understand once you read it, that I purchased as well, and I am so excited. Usually you'd be daunted by the fact that there's 12 books, and I'm not. I am excited that there's 12 books and I have more Shadowhunter world to live in. So, anyway, sorry, I got really excited. So those are my top 5, not my top 5, but yeah, I'd say my top 5 books / series that I have read in recent times, the past year and a half. I would love to know if you guys have read any of them. I'd love to know what kind of books you guys have been reading and what have been your favorites. I'd love any recommendations. I'm always looking for new things to get on my shelves. So yeah, and if you guys have any recommendations for things that you would like to hear on our next library chat, I would love to hear that as well. So thank you guys for hanging out, and I will see you very soon.